Hey guys, how's it going? MegaLugia here, one of your announcers for the MPL, and today people, we are back with week 6 of the power rankings. Now, usually I'm joined by my co-host Turbo, but Turbo decided to fly off to Italy and leave me all alone to do this by myself, so thanks Turbo. No, but for real, he is off on holiday, so it will be just me this week, but he did leave some notes, so you will be getting his opinions. He won't be here, but he will be here with us in spirit, and that's all that matters, am I right? Anyway, let's move on to the power rankings. So number 12 for both me and Turbo, we have the San Francisco 49ers coached by Bizer. Now I do want to say that his match between him and the Anister Umbreons coached by Mystic was not uploaded this week, so we don't have much to go on. Although we know the result and the outcome, we don't have a replay to go through, so we're going to place him at number 12 because that is where he was placed last week. And although he did pick up a win this week, where we don't have evidence to see the replay or the plays that were made, so we want to see him be consistent in his wins, and hopefully next week if he gets a win as well, he can be moved up in the power ranking. So like I said, not much to go off for number 12. Moving on to number 11 for both me and Turbo, we have Dench, coach of the Verdian Beedrills, who went up against Jordy this week and the Leeds Rhyhorns. So let me go ahead and read off of what Turbo has to say. So he said Dench was simply overwhelmed this week, which I agree with. His prep was slightly subpar, and tilt was getting to him again. Like during the match, he was obviously ill, and he kept mentioning it throughout the match that he was faded, and you could obviously see it in his plays and his facial expressions, and everything just seemed to go wrong. It was just not a good time for him to play the match, and obviously it translated into his plays. He was on tilt, like Turbo said. He needs to stay calm in battle and perhaps take a little bit more time to think about his plays. Some of them are either too predictable or too bold and never really gain him much of an advantage. Like for example, although this wasn't a misplay, when the match started off, Jordy had his Thunders out and Dents did not go ahead. He did not, I don't think he remembered that Thunders gets Pranks or T-Wave, or at least I might have missed it, but I do not remember him mentioning it in his commentary. So I was hoping, I was praying, I was like, Dench, yo, he gets Pranks or T-Wave. Also, that's the thing. There were some misplays which I remember. Going for a Moonlight was a misplay with the Clefable. Rocks were pretty obvious, so he could have gone into Latios, since most likely Scald or Earth Power or even Poison would have done much, so he could have gone to the Gyarados as well. And the rocks were obvious coming from the Seismitoad, so if he went into the Gyarados, first of all, it was a free opportunity to set up and not take that Stealth Rock damage. Like I said, Dench seemed kind of out of it because he was sick. He was just making a few misplays. Like another one was he was behind a sub with the Gyarados. Why switch out your Gyarados? You have a free sub. At least get a hit off. Go for a crunch, whatever it may be. You know, get that free damage and then switch out so you don't waste your sub. There was another misplay in the match where he had his Darmanitan out versus the Thundurus, and he kept mentioning it. He kept saying it to himself. The Thundurus is crucial to Jordy. He's not going to want to waste it. But Dench goes ahead and clicks Flare Blitz because, you know, I don't understand why he did it. It was a misplay. The obvious switch into Seismitoad was obvious, and Dench, again, if you just take your time and think about your plays and weigh up the pros versus the cons, you'll be doing a lot better. Like, he was obviously going to switch out his Thundurus because it was crucial to his victory, and he went into Seismitoad, who took relatively very little damage. Another misplay in the game is when he had his Rotom in and he went for the Will-O-Wisp instead of the Volt Switch. If he got the Volt Switch, he would have got the initiative and could have gone into Latios or Clef and then done some serious damage back. So just a few series of misplays, and like I said, I understand that he was sick and that probably took a lot out of him. So he is at number 11 for both me and Turbo. Coming in at number 10 for both me and Turbo, we have the Blackthorn Frogadiers coached by Ayoku. Now, the Frogs are a great example of what I want to see in the 49ers. They lost, however, the way they played and prepped it was really good. He was playing against a top contender in our power rankings, being Aura, and he played very, very well. Each play was calculated, it was thought out, and he weighed up the pros and the cons, and he needed to see what he needed to be done. In the end, he didn't win the match, but that doesn't take away from his really great play style. Like he worked the Klefki really well with the screens and the spikes and the Thunder Wave shenanigans. It really got into Aura's head. It was a really, really close game in the end, and he just lacked just one really ballsy play to get him the momentum and pick up that win in the end. For example, when he started off the match, Wheezing was in, and it was a good play going for the taunt, expecting to switch out. Screens were a good bring on Klefki as well. You usually don't see screens. That was good to see. The Starmie worked really well as Aura kept fearing the T-Bolt from it. Although he didn't have it, it still put in a lot of work. One thing I didn't like is bringing fully physical defensive Tangrowth with Rocky Helmet. Yes, it does stop or check the Mega Medicham relatively well, but again, you're taking away from its SPDEF, and its SPDEF is really low as it is, and if you just put an Assault Vet up there, it does bring it up to par. And just fully investing into physical defense just leaves no room for Tangrowth to take any special hit, and that was a bit of a misplay in my part on the prepping side. But he did make some good plays, like I said. The Klefki spikes and the screens and the T-Wave, it was a lot of chip damage slowly adding up against Aura. One thing I did want to see, it was late in the game, he had his Electivire in and it was Choice Scarf. Why not run Thunder Punch? There was a point in the game where I think there was Medicham, Slowking, and Togekiss left in the game, and he had Volt Switch. Now, Togekiss was eating up those Volt Switches for days. Heatran has really good special defense. If he had Thunder Punch at that point of the game, I think he could have really cleaned up. Just Scarfing the Thunder Punch would have knocked out the Togekiss, the Heatran, and the Medicham, so that is a bit of another misplay on the prepping part. In the end, the game did DC, so it could have played out a different way, but I think Aura had it wrapped up. But like I said, Frogs did play really well, but unfortunately they did not pick up the win, and they are here at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have the Chicago Chandelures. So I have a few things I want to say about this game. First off, from the beginning of the match, I saw no Talonflame, and I was really wondering why he didn't bring it on behalf of Asteroid's part. The Talonflame would have put in a lot of work, especially as a late game cleaner. Bandit Braver could have done a lot of damage to the Tornadus, the Blastoise, the Florges, the Excadrill with a Flare Blitz. You know, it had a lot of potential. It wasn't going to pick up straight Okos, but had a lot of potential during the end of the match after all that chip damage has been done to come in and sweep, you know. So that's one misplay. I think he should have brought the Talonflame. Another misplay was the Mew setting up too early. Yes, it went from the Nasty Paw and it could have done a lot of damage, but he should have saved that till the end of the game. The rest of Pat's Mons had not taken enough damage for a Nasty Paw sweep to occur. If he pulled that off late game, I could have definitely seen that putting in some work and Pat not having a lot of answers to it. So that is one thing to take into consideration for next week. Know your late game, have a good vision of the end game, and leave your setup sweepers to the end potentially. I also like that he had the U-turn on the Electros. A lot of times you like to see Volt Switch, but Pat did have 2 immunities, so the U-turn bring was good to see, still getting him that momentum and that Volt turn core. But another thing I want to add is physical Hydreigon. Now, I know physical Hydreigon is not a weird thing, you know, it has been run before, but against, yes, also the heads, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but like I said, I know physical is good. It could have done damage to the Florges, who is specially oriented, but you could have had it as a mix set. Like he had the Head Smash, which was, I'm assuming, meant for the Rotom, which would have done a ton of damage, but the Hippowdon stayed in, and it really didn't do that much damage. I would have seen either like a Life Orb, a Life Orb mix set would have done a lot more damage. The Draco, the Dark Pulse, the Flash Cannon, that would have put a lot more damage against Pat's team. I didn't like the physical bring, but that's just me. He did bring some good things though. He made some risky plays. He brought some good sets, like having the Berry on the Volcarona to take that Hidden Power Rock from the floor. Gets very good bring. He knew that one Mon is probably going to pack HP Rock to take care of it, and he realized that it was really pivotal for him to have that late game sweep. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, as Pat did pick up the win, but I really like that rock reducing Berry. There was some risky plays that paid off in his advantage. For example, when Asteroid switched out his Hydreigon versus the Blastoise with Empoleon, it was risky because he had the Empoleon in. It was risky because Blastoise versus Empoleon, what's Blastoise usually going to go for? An Aura Sphere, because that's the only thing that can touch the Empoleon. So if Blastoise did go for that and Hydreigon came in, it would have done a ton of damage. But good ballsy switching right there. Also, another thing, he had the Steel Wing on the Empoleon. He revealed it too late, in my opinion. He went for the Scald, predicting, you know, maybe the Blastoise to come in or something else to come in. The Steel Wing would have done a lot of damage to his other Mons. he showed it too late. I think if he went straight away for the steel wing, it wouldn't have caught the floor just off guard. Pat probably had it predicted in the back, but wasting all that time allowed the floor just to get recovery, and then steel wing wasn't enough, so that is one misplay. But we have Chicago Sun-Lures at number 9. Now let's move on to the next one. In number 8, we have the Anastar Umbreons coached by Mystic. Like I said, this was the battle that wasn't uploaded this week between him and the San Francisco 49tails, so there's not much we can comment on. We're going to have him here at number 8. At number 7, people, we have the Leeds Rhyhorns. So the way that me and Turbo generally feel about this game is that the Leeds Rhyhorns played a very, very safe game against Dench, and that's all they had to do. You know, you can only beat who's in front of you, and he played a safe game. He made the plays he needed to. He realized the pros and cons of what would happen after he made each play, and the safe plays worked out in the end. You don't always have to go balls to the wall, super risky, super heat sets, you know, to put work against your opponent. Sometimes safe plays work, especially if your opponent is not playing that well. In this case being Dench this week. He had very good prep for Dench's potential clef in the Darmanitan. He always had, turn after turn, he made the right turns, gaining him momentum, not allowing Dench to gain a lot of momentum himself and get the setup that he wanted. He kept pressuring him, and it worked really well. But yeah, we don't have much to say because he played really well. Let's not take anything away from him, but he made the safe plays, and it worked out really well against Dench this week, so we have him here at number 7. And now coming in at number 6, this is where the list starts to differ a little bit. So Turbo has the St. Louis Sableyes, while I have Cypher, coach of the Detroit Leopards. So what Turbo says is Dan showed what he can really do with this week, because as we know, Dan is a really good player. He just hasn't been playing this well, and he has been on tilt recently. So he had a powerful setup team, and a sweep. Oh my god, that sweep was glorious. He had a plan, he executed it, and it worked really well. Really good prep, really good execution. He had a good vision of the end game, and he realized what was what, especially when he saw the Raikou set and he realized that his Latios was faster. So good things there. So that's Turbo's number 6. So in my number 6, I have Cypher. Now I want to say from the beginning, what a hell of a game. That start was insane. I could not have predicted it. So it was the Kirin B versus the Thunderous. Now Cypher expected the Thunderous to be scarfed, which it usually is, but in this case it was Focus Sash, and when do you ever expect a Focus Sash Thunderous, right? It's rarely ever seen. So he was feeling the Choice Scarf, but he didn't really want to switch out, so he went for the Ice Beam, and it brought it down to its Focus Sash, and then Thunderous went for the Focus Blast, and it connected, and Kyurem still survived the hit. It was an insane game from the beginning. I was like, oh my god, I did not expect that to happen. Maybe it was just excited. Maybe it was just me that was excited. I don't know, let me know. You can't really blame Cypher for staying in and going for the Ice Beam, because you never really expect a Focus Sash Thunderous, and if its best move to knock out the Kyurem was Focus Blast, it is Focus Miss, as we know, and that move tends to miss most of the time. Cypher made some good plays, and he made some risky plays, like switching out versus the Scizor was risky. Because if the Scizor set up a Bullet Punch, it would have been a lot harder for him to come back. He had a great view of the moves that Jolt was going to go for, like when the Swampert was in, he predicted the Stealth Rocks, and he brought the Kyurem Black in so he could get one more hit off. Personally, obviously we obviously look at this with hindsight, so it's a lot easier to say, but I feel like Substitute Mega Venusaur could have put in a lot of work versus Jolt's team. It would have been amazingly efficient, especially versus the Swampert, who's obviously going to switch out, the Superior, which can't do much damage. Like I said, I feel Substitute Mega Venusaur could have put in a lot of work. You look at your Mons on the opposing team when you're team prepping, you're like, alright, what's going to switch out when I bring in the Mega Venusaur? Swampert? Probably. Superior? Probably. You get a free sub off, and now you can do a lot of damage back, so that's one thing he may want to consider for the next weeks. He did have some hacks in his favor, like the Iron Tail miss with the Salamence, although he didn't see it, so that's one thing you should always be calculating, always be taking every consideration into account and looking at what the moves that happened. But yeah, there we go. My number 6 pick is the Detroit Leopards. Moving on to number 5, Turbo has the Detroit Leopards, and I have the Baltimore Braviary, so let's move on to what Turbo has to say. Turbo's explanation was that the Detroit Leopards lacked a reliable wall as shown versus Token, as his team proved to be too offensive for Token's calculated and technical team. He suggests a dip into the free agents to pick up a wall of some sort that perhaps dedicated to that job. So a bit of I kind of agree with him. Although you can have Mega Venusaur as a wall, it does get chipped down. It doesn't have a way of removing status. So bit of information that you might want to take into consideration. But that's why Turbo has the Detroit Leopards at number 5. So coming in at my number 5, we have the Baltimore Braveries. Now, Blake dropped some places this week, and that's because he got 6-0 swept by Dan. Now, this was a very interesting game. Blake usually preps really well, but he brought some very interesting, not very effective sets in my opinion this week. So he brought Raikou with screens. Now, usually if you want to catch your opponent off guard, right, people expect Raikou to be, you know, a one-trick pony. Choice Specs, Choice Scarf, Vulture, Thunderbolt, HP Ice, Shadow Ball, something to that effect. But he bought screens. It could work, but having it not outspeed the Latios was a bit of a misplay in my opinion. Yes, he could have expected the speed creep for the Latios not to outspeed the Raikou, you know, when speed creeping and all that kind of stuff, but you're gonna want to make sure that you at least outspeed the Latios. And it played pivotal in certain situations when he switched out the Raikou into the Manaphy and he brought the Raikou back in. I see that a bit of a misplay because he was trying to bait in some moves, but again the Latios would have just outsped it on the next turn anyway and taken it out. He had Toxic on there as well. The Toxic missed in the beginning, a bit unfortunate, but in the end I don't really think it played too much into the game because the Jolteon did get off a heal ball later on. Spoilers, by the way. But yeah, screens, Raikou was not a great bring. I think if he just stuck with the traditional, maybe, you know, spec set, he could have gone for the Shadow Ball and done some damage to the Latios. So that's one thing to consider. Manaphy as well with the Heart Swap. That's a pretty good set, you know. It does definitely put in some work. If Latios comes in and it's like, you know, +3/+3 with the Calm Mind, you immediately take those Heart Swaps, and now Manaphy is a force to be reckoned with. He just didn't get it off at the right time, and it just didn't work in the situation this week. One of the biggest things I think cost him was over predicting and trying to make some really ballsy plays. So Mega Latios was in, he went for the Psychic against the Raikou, and then he switched out immediately into the Crawdon expecting another Psychic. But you know, you got to consider that Dan is not a bad player, and Mega Latios has access to a lot of moves, and Thunderbolt being one of them. So if he went for the Thunderbolt versus the Raikou, it wouldn't have been that much of a drawback as it wasn't that offensive. It was a defensive Raikou, so you could have gone for the Thunderbolt and got us some damage. And if the Crawdon then did came in, then, you know, it was GG. So a bit over prediction there. More over prediction came in, especially when he had the Nidoqueen in. So it was the Nidoqueen versus the Jolteon. Jolteon outspeeds, goes for the Heal Bell. That's obvious, but he goes for the Ice Punch, predicting the Latios to come in. I think at that point in the match, he was so far back, he just needed to hit what was in front of him. Going for the Ice Punch allowed the Jolteon to live it, especially with that HP investment that Dan had, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. He made more over predictions. Ice Punch is when he should have gone for the Earthquake versus the Scolipede. So like I said, hit what's in front of you, especially in that point in the match when you're so far back. So he's not a horrible player. He just got swept this week. That stuff happens. So I have him in at number 5. At number 4, Turbo has the Baltimore Braveries, while I have the St. Louis Sableyes. So Turbo's explanation for the Baltimore Braveries is he wants Blake to prep. Specifically, he's like, prep, Moxie, prep. He says that when Blake preps in the past, he comes up with some really great sets and some really innovative techniques, but that was a miss this week. Nidoqueen was notably lacking the Sucker Punch, which he thinks would have had a lot of damage, which would have put in a lot of work, and if he had more time to prep, then he would have obviously brought it, and things could have turned out differently there, especially, you know, not those over predictions versus the Jolteon and the Scolipede. He could have just gone for the safe play like the Earthquake, and then when the Latios comes in, he could have gone for the Sucker Punch. Bit more of a 50-50 there, you know, with the Calm Mind and the Roost, but, you know, it could have worked out to his advantage there. At my number 4, I have the St. Louis Sableyes, the person who got the sweep on the Baltimore Braveries. And Dan, GG to you, my man. You played perfectly this game. The sets were immaculate, like especially realizing the plays that you can go on for. Like I mentioned, going for the T-Ball versus the Raikou wasn't that big of a misplay because although he did predict the Crawdon to come in, but going for a Thunderbolt was a relatively safe play because the Raikou was defensive. It couldn't have done a lot of damage off to the Latios. The best thing he could have done was the Toxic. So going for the Thunderbolt, predicting to want it to go into the Crawdon, great play right there, baller play. Having HP investment on the Jolteon was great as well, allowing you to tank some hits, and having Heal Bell at the end was clutch, allowing you to get that Toxic off your Latios, making sure it can come in, set up, and get the rest of the kills needed. There's not much I really want to say. He just played really well. Everything just went great. In the end, having the Registeel, making sure he can survive calcing and prepping in the team prep, making sure he can survive 2 Earthquakes from the Glalie, having the Rocky Helmet, having the T-Wave, so then he can come in and outspeed with the Emboar and just obliterate the Glalie. Really great plays there from Dan, and hopefully this is a trend and we see him continue to move up in the power rankings and pick up some wins. Coming in number 3 for both me and Turbo, we have the Toronto Staraptors. Both of us have pretty much the same thing to say. Toronto Raptors and Jolt they prep really well. Like, they calculate everything and they take everything into consideration. You see he goes for a play and you think, oh, that might be a misplay, but it's because he has something in the back and he knows that he still has his win condition in check. For example, when I saw him go for the DD with the Salamence, I thought that was a bit of a misplay because Cypher did have the Gramble in the back with the Intimidate, and Iron Tail was gonna do max at around 40 to 50%, and then he could have just got O-code back with a player off, but I was like, you know, man, why are you doing that? That's a misplay. But he knew he just needed to get that chip damage off. Unfortunately it did miss, but if he got that chip damage off, he could have come in with a Sylveon like he did and just wreck house from there. Calm Mind, Hyper Voice, it was a lot of damage to Cypher's team, and he couldn't really play around it. And what Turbo has to say is Token is really making him, he feels like Token is really making himself feel stupid for his first set of power rankings, and what a battle that was from him. He knew early on that Sylveon was his win check and he preserved it, just like I said as well, and Swampert was expertly EV to counter the Life Ords, and Token's speed on the speed creeping was amazing as well. Me and him are both really hyped after seeing this battle, and we're looking forward to what he can bring in the future. At number 2, ladies and gentlemen, we have Pterodactyl, coach of the Sin Study Staraptors. Now, he played a really good game this week. He could have perhaps played for a higher differential, you know, just to take that thing into consideration, but overall he played a really good game. Tornadus coming clutch in the end, but although that's why we have him at number 2 and not number 1, there were a few, you know, risky situations, a few certain misplays. For example, if that Hurricane did not hit at the end of the game, I can't really blame you for hitting a move. That's why, you know, I'm not criticizing, but I'm just saying if he did move that Hurricane, which is 70% accurate, then the Volcarona could have done a lot of damage. So that's just one thing to take into consideration. Few weird plays at the beginning of the match when he switched into Hippowdon and then into Blastoise, when he could have just switched into Blastoise in the first place, because it would have been the same outcome anyway, the rocks being up. So bit of a weird misplay there. Another few misplays, like when the Florges was in versus the Empoleon, going for Protect I think was a bit of a misplay, because Empoleon knows that, you know, Florges can't really do a lot of damage back to it, so he's expecting to switch out, or at least, you know, maybe take a Moonblast, which isn't going to do that much damage. So the Stealth Rocks were obvious on Asteroid's part, so I think he should have made a double into something else, or not go for Protect, because that was essentially a free turn for Asteroid to get up his Stealth Rocks. But overall, he played really well. He made some good predictions, and he played safe in the end. But he is at number 2, and for both me and Turbo. And the number 1 spot this week, we have Aura, coach of the Houston Megahorns, and what a game he played this week. So let me go over what Turbo has to say. So Aura played a perfect game. He predicted everything to perfection and knew that his win check was there and when to use it. The Frogs gave him an absolutely great game, and they played extremely well, so perhaps going for the killer blow, if Aura went for the killer blow earlier, it might have helped him, but instead he went safe with Togekiss. He really loved his Tyranitar play and his general Heatran shenanigans, so overall an excellent game there from Turbo. Now, from my perspective, in the beginning of the game, I was a bit of unsure of his plays. I thought he was making some aggressive, unnecessary plays that could have really hindered him late in the game and could have really set him back. But in the end, it proved that to work really well, and his Heatran Togekiss core just worked so well. Ayuko had Charizard X. Charizard's usually going to run Dragon Dance, Roost, and then some combination of either Earthquake, Flare Blitz, or Dragon Claw. Now, Heatran and Togekiss worked so well for this reason. If Charizard X wants to go for the Flare Blitz, then Heatran switches in, does nothing. Then if he wants to go for the Earthquake, which Heatran was on an Air Balloon, he can't go for that, and he can just switch into the Togekiss. If he has a Dragon Claw, then Togekiss is immune, and Heatran takes very little damage. So it was really hard for Ayuko to prep against, and really good bring on Aura's part, bringing those two Mons and realizing the synergy and defensive capabilities that it had to wall the Charizard X. The Klefki play was a real annoyance and thorn in his side to Aura. He knew that he couldn't stay in with certain things like the Mega Medicham. He didn't want to get Thunder Wave, but then that allowed the Klefki to get a free spike up, but then he could just bring in the Togekiss and go for the default. It was a lot of doubles in this game, and in the end it worked out for Aura. He calculated every one specifically, and he even had some hacks work against his favor, and he still managed to pick up a win. And that's probably one of the reasons why we have him here at number 1, is because although not everything went his way, he didn't go on tilt. He stayed calm, he realized what he needed to do, and have his win checks in the end of the game. For example, having 2 paralysis on Heatrans prevented him from getting up rocks. Fortunately, he got those rocks up near the end game, and that prevented the Charizard from doing much damage. Heatran also missed a Fire Blast, which was crucial. And the Electivire put in a lot of damage in versus his team, but he realized, wait, if I get rid of the spikes, I do all this, I bring in my win check at the end of the game, I can still win this game. And it's just that great vision of the end game, which I really appreciate, and Aura played the game really well, so we have him here at number 1, despite the hacks, despite the shenanigans, and despite the misplays. He is here at number 1. And there you have it, guys, week 6 of the MPL power rankings. I hope you enjoyed watching. Make sure to let us know what you thought in the comments down below. Hopefully Turbo will be back next week, and until next time, make sure to check out all the coaches and us in the description down below. MegaLugia here, checking out. Peace.